Welcome back, everybody. How did you enjoy your coffee break? Did you enjoy it? Alright, let's see, you know what question I'm gonna ask next. How many of you have met someone they didn't know before? Okay, let's try asking it the other way around, so I'm sure we have a 100% success rate. How many of you did not meet anyone new today? See, 100% success rate. Okay. We have a panel discussion and then a talk on design thinking. We're going to swap these. So we'll start with the design thinking and then we'll have the panel discussion about women in tech. So next on stage, I would like to invite the founder of designthinking.bg and one of the big design thinking evangelists here in Bulgaria, Elina Zheleva.
So it's not women in entrepreneurship, but I could easily qualify for that as well. Are you having fun, guys? Yeah, I hope so. I mean, there is more fun coming tonight and all day tomorrow and tomorrow night, so I hope you stay until the very end and we meet again. So I think in the agenda it was written Design Thinking Workshop. I honestly wish I could do a workshop with so many people in so little time, but I can't. So it's a small talk about some important aspects of design thinking that I personally think are important to startups. Do I have a clicker? Yeah, I do. Okay. So let's start, at least with a little conversation. How many of you do use youth research in your startups? Okay, I see a few hands. How many of you know what youth research is about and know at least a few techniques? I see less hands. What's going on? How many of you guys like troublemaking? You know what troublemaking is, Come on! I was not expecting this. So for those of you who are not very familiar with youth research, don't worry. Youth research is exactly the same as troublemaking, and I'll come to that in a second. Let me first present myself. I'm Eli. I'm a design thinking coach and consultant. And design thinking, for those of you who might not know, is a methodology for developing innovative solutions. These might be products, services, processes, things like this. And I think it's because of the word innovation. A lot of people think that what I do has a link to technology, which is not really true because what I do most of the time is very, very analog. For example, I spend a lot of my, hours teaching people how to talk to other people. I work with companies, and not just companies, also people from the public sector, and a lot of startup founders, which is not really to teach them how to get, what I do most of the time is very, very analog. For example, I spend a lot of my company, hours teaching how to talk to other people. Experiments, I work with companies to find out not just companies, also the user public sector, and a lot of startup founders, the unmet, teach them how to have your users conversation with their users. Why? How every problem we find out, it's an opportunity for the company to make the situation better, to find out, to start their innovation initiatives. So all these methods, introducing observation, your users have determined current results. This is called use research. Every problem, and I call it out, troublemaking because all you do essentially is you're looking for problems, you're working for innovation. If you get paid for this like I do, you're a professional. All these techniques, interviewing, observation, the joke is experiment, research, this is for use research, thinking. And I'm going to speak about the full process of design thinking here. I'm just going to speak about youth research. And, it's the trigger in design thinking to new product development, to new innovation initiatives. And there are really three things that I want to mention to you today about youth research. The first one is why you should do it. Or what are the consequences if startups don't do it. So I'd like to advocate a little bit about youth research. The second thing is I'd like to share with you is why most startups don't do youth research, or what are based on my observations, the most common, I wouldn't call them, prejudices, or maybe they are excuses, I don't know, for startups not to do user research. And my third point is, I actually would like to share with you a few very easy user research techniques. So easy, anybody can use. They're a little bit unusual, but very effective. So let me start with my first point. Why is user research important? What I have seen that a lot of startups do is they jump from an idea into product development. No user research, no nothing. And the situation looks like this. How do I change slides? Right. The situation looks like this. I mean, this is what happens if you plunge into product development without understanding who your user is, what his needs are, and how are you going to satisfy these needs. So most of the startups that I meet, and that's not only my observation, because I speak to other startup mentors, have never spoken to their users, and they have launched the product. And speaking or having a conversation, leading an interview with your users is the minimum form of user research you can have. And I'll speak about this later. So this is what happens, and I think this attitude of jumping very quickly into product development, from your idea into product development, leads to failed products. And I think it happens in three specific ways, and I'll speak about this now. So the first thing that happens, I got it. The first thing that happens as you jump from your idea into product development is you start to invest, right? You invest your time, you invest money, you invest emotions, you invest connections, everything. And then as you invest, you start to fall in love with your idea. It becomes your baby, and it becomes, something that you're very protective of. You're even, defensive of your own deficiencies, not your own, but the deficiencies of your own product. And this is a problem because I call this the love lock syndrome, by the way. Because you become locked to your idea, and any feedback, if people want to give you feedback, it's kind of half heard. You're not listening as attentively as you should be. And this generally leads to a failed product. The other scenario that happens a lot is, as you jump, from your idea immediately into product development without any user research, you tend to build very cluttered products. And I call products with too many features. I call this the Swiss Army knife syndrome. These products are also, prone to failure because you don't understand your user needs, and what is more important here, the priority of these needs. So you're building a product with way too many features, you're building a product for everybody, and it ends up to be a product for nobody. The other thing that happens a lot based on what I have seen is as you jump from idea to product development, you tend to build very generic products. So these are products that are difficult to differentiate. I call this the tomato jar syndrome because they all look and feel the same. And this usually happens when, let's say, you got inspired by an existing product, and you and your team decided we can build this better. We can build it faster, more reliable, more secure, whatever. And you got inspiration from this existing product, and instead of spending, more time studying your users, you spend more time studying your competitor's product. So what happens is you're building very close to the original product, and at the end, it becomes very difficult to differentiate. I'm not saying getting inspiration from existing products or copycats is a bad idea. I'm just saying you gotta be, aware of what could happen. So these are the scenarios which I have observed. And now I'd like to speak a little bit about why startups usually don't do user research. What are the typical excuses I hear? Or maybe these are prejudices, I don't know. The first one I hear a lot is, it will slow us down. We've got so many things to do, we don't have time for use research. And I was recently watching a presentation by one of Google Ventures partners. It's the partner for UX. And he was speaking to some startups, and the presentation was called Use Research Quick and Dirty. And he said to those startups, if you guys want to launch your product, use research will slow you down. If you guys want to launch a great product, use research will speed you up. I got so inspired by this quote that I decided to call my talk how use research can speed you up. The only thing, I honestly have nothing else to add to this. The only thing that I could throw in is maybe a recent conversation I was having with a friend of mine, and he's a really good tech guy and a very good entrepreneur. And he told me, but Ellie, you don't understand. We are tech guys. We like to build things, we like to break things, and we like to build them again. So we don't like talking to people. And I said, you know what? Use research does not prevent you from doing what you love. It does not prevent you from building. It actually might require that you build a little bit more. What it does is it channels your efforts into building the right things, into making the right tests. In fact, you might end up building more, as I said. So this much about speed and use research. I hear somebody laughing already. I hear a lot this excuse. Why should we speak to users at all? They don't know what they want. And I often get a quote, the quote by Henry Ford, the famous quote, if I had asked not my users, but the people what they want, they would have said a faster horse. And that's absolutely true. Often people don't know what they want, especially if you're working on something very innovative. Often people cannot express what they want because they only use the terms and things they've seen. But what I have to say here is that use research is not crowdsourcing. You're not going to your users to ask them about ideas. You're going to your users to understand them, to understand how they feel, what is causing a problem, and find yourself, a little niche where you can position your product. Ideas will have to come from you. You're the creator. You're the Henry Ford. In design thinking, we have a saying, because of course some users will tell you, build this, build that, they would have demands. In design thinking, we say, don't build according to demands, build according to needs. And that's the purpose of use research. That's what you gotta find out. The last excuse I hear a lot is we're not experts. And I kind of empathize with this because, startup founders have to become experts very quickly in many different fields. But the good news here is that, there are so much expertise out there. If you look at this conference, we have Bob, we have Rob, we have Sam, all of these people, they're talking about, some angle of customer development. How can you engage with your customers early on and build what they want, what they need? So another very, very good resource that is online and that I recommend you use is the Google Ventures Design Library. It's a very generous library. You can find a lot of different use research techniques, interviewing tips, and even templates. For example, what kind of questions to ask, how to recruit people for interviews. Recruiting people for interviews is as important as how you lead the interview. So who you interview matters as much as how you lead the interview. So you can find all sorts of things here. And me as well, I wanted to help add to this expertise. And I have selected 3 techniques that I want to share with you, 3 techniques about use research. And when I was selecting them, I think I was coming from another observation that I have about startups, which is startup founders don't really feel very comfortable leading a formal interview. Inviting people, putting them in a room and having like this very formal discussion. So the techniques that I've chosen are techniques for mildly introverted people, but can be used by anybody. And the other thing I was looking for is, because specifically interviews, which I mentioned before, is maybe the easiest and the simplest form of user research, could be tricky. I think Rob will be speaking about this tomorrow. You can get a lot of bias, you can get a lot of uncredible information. So I was looking for techniques that, inherently have less bias in them. So let me start. The first technique that I'd like to share with you is the stealth interview. Have you heard about it? Yeah, okay, good. So I'm on a good line here. The stealth interview is basically what it says. Stealth means you're in a stealth mode. You're not telling the other person you are working on your product. It's not an interview. It's like a casual conversation. It's not planned. It could happen anytime, anywhere. And I'll give you one example because I think that's the easiest way to understand. Okay. Imagine you're at a conference. Okay? I was almost, switching to Bulgarian. Imagine you're at a conference like this one, and imagine you're a startup who is working on, let's say, a carpooling app. And there is somebody who comes to speak to you, like it happens a lot of conferences. And it turns out this person has just arrived, to the conference, and he has arrived from a destination that's in your carpooling app. Okay, but he arrived by train. So this is the perfect opportunity to get some information out of this person because he's a traveler. So you can find about his, traveler's needs, his traveler preferences, things like this. So you can start by simply asking this person, how was your journey, on the train? Why did you choose to go on the train? What other options did you consider? And if the conversation goes okay, if it's not too awkward, you can ask this person, how about carpooling? And, stealth interview is a lot like, Alice in Wonderland knocking on the different doors. You don't know what will come out. You don't know if this person has experience or not with carpooling. But maybe he does. Maybe he just, has a very recent, maybe very negative, maybe very positive experience with carpooling and he could share this with you. Maybe, he doesn't know about carpooling or he has, some prejudices against carpooling. In any case, you'll find some valuable information about travelers' needs, about travelers' behavior. Stealth interview is very good for two reasons. The first one is, as you're in stealth mode, you're not telling this person, at least not in the very beginning, that you're working on this product. He's not tweaking his answers. That's what people do during interviews. As you tell them what you're working on, they're trying to give you answers that either please you or they're trying to give you the right answer. In any case, there is bias. Okay? The stealth interview kind of, taps it down. The other thing that the stealth interview is good for is that usually you will be speaking about a very recent experience. At interviews, people like to speak in general. And when people speak in general, they lie. They exaggerate. They miss details. In any case, they give you uncredible information. Stealth interviews tone this down because they're speaking about something that happened to them very recently. Okay? So, the other one is very simple. It's called the user diary, and it's basically for the ultimately introverted startup founders. You outsource all the work to your users. You do nothing, almost. So user diary works like this. Imagine, I have to give another example, otherwise it's totally unclear. Imagine you're working on, let's say you have a startup who's interested in the health issue. And you're considering building some, fitness app. So you're in the very early stages. It's a good idea to use the user diary and recruit some people. Maybe first, if you're in the early stages, you can recruit some friends and family. And You can ask them to make a plan of all the healthy, sporty things they want to do during the week. And then every day they send you a little diary, a little report of what they actually did or they didn't do, why, and how it made them feel. This technique generates a lot of information, so you got to take this into account. You got to make some time to analyze this data. But it's very good if you want to catch some behavioral patterns, why people do certain things. It's very, very powerful for that. It comes from service design, and actually there is an app that you can use to keep track of these diaries. It's called Experience Fellow. It's developed by some people that I know, very good team of service designers, and it would help your work immensely. User diary technique is especially useful for startups that have a service component, for startups that are in the field of personal development, like learning, education, things like this, and for anything that has to do with healthcare, because it's based a lot on behaviors, okay? And the last technique is my favorite one. It's called fly on the wall, and you do exactly that. You are the fly on the wall. It means you observe, you discreetly shadow what's going on without interrupting the process. Maybe some of you know fly on the wall from usability texts. Do you? I see some hands. But I meant it here in an offline context. Imagine you're a startup that is, what shall we say? Let's say you're building an inventory management app. Or let's avoid the apps, but okay. App plus a hardware device that helps inventory managers can, stock in a warehouse. So this technique is very good if your startup team doesn't know very well the industry. Imagine you have one or two people who know this industry, but not everybody knows it. It's a good idea to just pick up the phone, call a few warehouses, and agree with them to make a visit for a day, for half a day, as much as you can afford. And your job is to be the fly on the wall. Just observe what's going on, who does what are the interactions, what are the activities, what takes the longest, what is the most common problem, why, how do they cover up for it. You're looking for a nice problem that you can position your startup in. You're looking for a real problem. That's what you do when you're the fly on the wall. So, this was the last technique that I had in mind to present for you. And I gotta say, I gave you 3. There are maybe hundreds of user research techniques. The important thing is, first of all, that you make a user research plan for your startup. Don't copy what others are doing. Startups are very specific when it comes to user research. You might have very, very specific needs. Sometimes a simple usability test will do the work. Sometimes you gotta dig deeper. The other thing that I want to say is there are many techniques, so make sure you combine them. In user research, we speak a lot about data triangulation, which means you got to pull data from different sources to check the validity of this data. So combine them. And just a few words in conclusion. A lot of people think that it's the data that's the biggest added value from user research. In fact, data is a benefit. Yes, you get a lot of quantitative data, about user profiles, needs, behaviors, things like this. But I think there is another hidden added value. And this is that you get to meet your users. You get to know your users. And that's very, very important because this develops empathy. And empathy is a very nice thing to have, because it allows you to understand and care for the other person's problem. In fact, there is a study that proves that the sheer contact with your users, your FaceTime with them, no FaceTime on your smartphone, but the direct contact with them improves your UX exponentially. And even 2 hours of FaceTime with your users has an impact. Okay? So empathy is a nice feeling to have, because it makes you fall out of love with your idea. You're falling in love with your user. And what happens is you're building a product that's not your product, that's not your idea, but you're building something that's focused on these users, that's easily differentiated by them, and that actually solves a problem. And with this, I want to leave you. I want to give you the last piece of advice. If you haven't started the conversation with your users, please do. And keep this conversation alive throughout your product development cycle. User research is not something you do in the beginning, you tick the box and you forget. It's something that keeps your product on track. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.